Hello, debt warriors, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fatta. Planning for college can be overwhelming, especially when it comes to finances. It's never too early to start preparing. While the college search and application process might wait until later in high school, saving for college should ideally begin earlier, even as early as infancy. Today, we're diving into all things related to college financial planning. I'm joined by Angie Grimm, a top college funding professional from College Solutions LLC. With over 15 years of experience, Angie excels at simplifying the college funding process and offering practical advice that families can easily use. We'll be covering topics like 529 accounts, the FAFSA, student loans, and much more. Now let's get to my interview with Angie. Hi, Angie. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Hi, thanks, Katie. I'm looking forward to visiting with you today.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about college financial planning. So to get started, what college savings accounts are available for parents who want to start saving for their children's college education?
Well, there's actually a lot more options out in today's world than what a lot of parents think that is the typical account. So we'll kind of start with some typical things that a lot of people discuss is 529 plans. They're usually state sponsored where parents can put money away, or aunts and uncles or even grandparents can put money away. Just think of it as a mutual fund that can only be used for college. So it is a single purpose dollar for higher education, and it has a lot of risk attached to it. But the biggest pro of it is you can take funds out in the future with no tax on those gains. So it is a market-based account, and some parents like those. And then other parents want more of a guaranteed solution, which could include, an educational savings account. Some parents we help look at an overfunded cash value life insurance account, or some people just start a bunch of CDs. So there are quite a few options out there for that.
Are there any limitations on these accounts, like the 529 or anything that people should be aware of?
Yeah, there's a couple cautionary things about 529. One is they are an asset that you have to disclose when you are reporting assets you own as a parent for financial aid. Oftentimes, parents find out later that maybe that 529 was limiting their availability to get financial aid because they invested in all the wrong spots. And like I said earlier, it's a single purpose dollar for higher education only. So if you have a student that gets out, wants to be an entrepreneur, and you want to help fund their, new business venture or a startup, you're not able to use that fund and gift that money to them. So it's just for higher education, whether it's a trade school or a 2-year or 4-year university. And you can use it on grad school as well.
Oh, okay. So what are the benefits to opening a college saving account for your child?
Well, in the big picture, I've been doing this a long time, working with students and parents. The more money you can set aside and put away, it mitigates your future exposure to student loans for your student or for you as parents. So cash is king for most things in life, and really for college, making sure you have liquidity available to access that money when you're ready to pay for that education, because it comes at you fast.
Right.
Your kid graduates high school. So.
Right. So once, a parent has decided, okay, I'm going to set up a saving account for my child's education, how much should they save each month towards these college expenses?
Well, we would love parents to start that when their kids are babies. Very rarely do we see that. But even if you started when your student is a kindergartner and you make a line item in your budget, what we're kind of lacking in America is true budget planning, really, for most families. But if you make a consistent contribution of, somewhere between $200 to $500 a month, you can go a long ways and make some headway for your kiddos by the time they get to college. Now, if you're starting in late stage planning, like most people come to me with, starting, say, sophomore, junior year, $500 a month isn't going to cut it for a $100,000 education, right? Then we have to start doing some detailed planning and looking at where will some other cash come from, other things that they have in their financial purview to maybe access. But the sooner you start, the better. time value of money is very, very important to have long-term compounding. So even if you can start even $100 a month when your child is a baby, that can go a long ways in a guaranteed account towards that college fund in the future.
And you kind of mentioned adding it to your budget, that savings. So, how do you balance your budget for saving for your child's college with saving for your own retirement, as well as everything else in your budget?
Right. The key to paying for college, Katie, is liquidity. We discuss this over and over and over with clients who come to us. So we like that people need to invest in their retirement and get their employer's match, right? But parents also need to be aware of they need to have liquidity for life's emergencies because they always happen. Raising that child, you're going to have braces. You might have, a car you want to help them with in the future. They might play club sports and you need a lot of liquidity. So if we can balance out some deferred money that's going to retirement at your employer's match, and then take the other funds you were going to put away and make sure we can have it liquid and accessible to us for long-term planning and emergencies. Because the less interest we pay to other people, the more interest our money can gain. So you really do have to sit down and be intentional with those line items in your budget to try to balance those two things. Because we can help anybody loan their way through college, but you can't loan your way through retirement. There's an intricate balance there for sure.
So when people are thinking of their child's education, they're mainly thinking of tuition, but there are many other costs associated with attending college. So can we break down what are the full costs associated with attending college?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're 100% correct. Don't just shop the tuition rate, because if that college is not in the same zip code, your student will have to move there. So you have to look at their average dorm rate. What do the meal plans cost? What are the average fees? Some colleges can have $1,000 to $2,000 a semester in fees alone for the healthcare, center, for
Mm-hmm.
the rec center that you don't get to opt out of, even if you live off campus.
Mm-hmm.
So ancillary fees. But what colleges and universities have been required to do over the last decade or so is be more transparent on that full cost of attendance. So they do have to disclose an estimated amount of room and board, of their fees and books, and actually have to also consider transportation costs. Is your student just, a car ride away? Or are they a plane ride away? Or are they two plane rides away? How many Thanksgiving, Christmas breaks can they come home for? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the other ancillary things like buying their shampoo and their contact solution? You're looking at a full cost of attendance at some schools anywhere between 30 grand to 90 grand. There's about 10 colleges or universities, in America that cost over 90 grand sticker price.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. There is a ton of like small things too that a lot of people don't think of,
Yes,
especially if they're living there, that you have to add on. So definitely
absolutely.
got to list out all those costs and base it off. Can you drive there? Can you live there? So,
The consumer, I call it, which is the student going, is much pickier now.
mm-hmm.
So sometimes we have students who want to go and they don't want to live in the traditional room with the roommate, 3 feet across the floor from them in the cinder block. They want the suites. Or some students with different, needs that they have, they might want a single room altogether. And so you're going to pay more, to have a premium room. And so you have to take those things into consideration of what is the housing option you're going to allow your student, to take advantage of.
Yeah, are a lot of universities nowadays kind of like they have different kinds of housing there? Like they're not just the traditional stuff anymore. Are you finding that a lot that they have more of suites and singles and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. They are moving to that because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those was over 30 years ago that I went to college, and those old dorms have been, leveled to the ground and making more suites, more apartment style things where maybe a student could cook more and not necessarily have to go to their food center all the time. So yeah, they have vastly improved those housing options, to make it more communal and for students to have a little more privacy than traditional old rooms.
That's obviously going to come at like a higher price tag, though, I'm assuming, than
Oh, absolutely.
traditional. So you have to consider all those factors too when thinking about the full cost of college. So
Absolutely.
I want to talk about the FAFSA. So, what is the FAFSA and why is it important?
Yeah, so the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. That is your federal application for any type of aid that you could receive from the federal government. And so every single parent with their student going on to college, regardless of their income, should file for the FAFSA every single year their child's in undergrad schoolwork. So regardless of income, regardless if you think you're going to get any type of need-based financial aid, it's highly recommended that you file that form. If you don't, you wouldn't have access to those federal direct loans that you might want your student to take out that does not require you to co-sign. And another portion of that, Katie, is it's your good faith estimate to the college to demonstrate your ability to pay for school and what level of help do you need besides the federal form. So you don't want to leave the college or university guessing about what your ability to help your student is, whether it's a little or it's a lot. And if you had a change of circumstance, or a natural disaster or something happens to you, you have a history of filing that if you have to appeal to the financial aid department because you had a change in circumstance, they'll have a history of your information from the year prior. So everyone needs to fill that out every year their students in undergrad work.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. So it needs to be filled out every year, not just going into your first year.
Correct. Renewal year, because it pulls off your prior year tax return. Some people who are small business owners or self-employed can have dramatic changes in their income year to year, which could either increase their availability of federal aid or decrease it. Options there for people.
Yeah. So if 1 year you might be able to get it, 1 year you're not, just based on. Okay. So it's very important to apply every year for the FAFSA. So
absolutely.
Going on that, so when do people need to apply for the FAFSA by, and when should they expect to hear back?
Typically, it's October 1 of your student's senior year, and then you have to allow several months of time for the college to receive that information after you've been admitted to send out your full financial aid package, helping you understand what loan you were granted or not, if you received any federal grants, any state grants, or any scholarships from the university themselves. So typically that can happen February, March, April of a student's senior year.
So when you get all that information back from financial aid, what should you plan to do if you don't receive as much as you expected to from the FAFSA or from financial aid in general?
Right. Well, typically parents are very surprised by that information because they didn't do any pre-planning. They didn't understand the costs. They didn't track the history of what the school has given out in the past. And really, actually, what winds up happening, Katie, is parents turn to all kinds of private loans to fill that gap because that's actually what they get offered. So you actually have to sit down with your student and help your student understand what everybody's coming to the table with, whether it's you as the parents, how much you're expecting them to loan. That's why we always recommend kids apply to 4 to 5 different colleges so you can have different choices on what you ultimately decide. And then can you cash flow some of that gap? Or do you have to turn to some private loans to fill that gap? But you really need to take your time looking through that and having a pointed conversation with your student of what this is going to look like going forward. So no one's surprised at the end about how much debt they're holding at the end of that education.
Can you also maybe even look into scholarships to fill those gaps?
Yeah, so typically the scholarship process is all throughout their senior year. So to be candid, if you're looking in May or June of your student's senior year and there's a gap, typically most of those scholarships at that point, they've already been given out.
Okay.
Is a process you would have had to have started, say, September of your senior year and applying to get something awarded to you in May or June.
When seniors start their senior year, where can they find these scholarship options?
Right. So the biggest source of scholarships is from the universities themselves. So that falls into what we call the second part of financial aid. There's 3 types of financial aid. There's need-based financial aid, there's merit scholarship financial aid, and then there are outside scholarship financial aid. So merit scholarships are the biggest piece of the pie based off your students' achievements. What was their class rank? What was their GPA? How high was their SAT or ACT score? Their leadership, their, musical abilities, their, athletic abilities. The biggest amount of scholarships comes from the universities themselves. So that's where we try to help students focused. Who has money for your student based off of their achievements? And then about 10% of those scholarships, Katie, come from outside sources, meaning your community. You need to check with your high school counselor on the community scholarships. check with your employer if they offer any scholarships for your student. And then you can scour the internet, on certain sites like fastweb.com or Going Merry for a full comprehensive search based on your profile. Those are pretty accurate sites, but we plan on about a 10% rate of return on those. So if you fill out 100 apps, we hope you get 9 or 10 of them. Mm-hmm. So it's a significant volume of work to chase down those ones online to try to be awarded those.
Once we have our information from the FAFSA, financial aid, all of our scholarships intact, and we're still parents still are looking for more money to pay for their kids' college, then they turn to student loans. So let's discuss student loans a little bit and how can they help pay for college?
Right. So typically the first loan that a parent gets offered through the financial aid system is through the Department of Education. It's called the Parent Plus Loan. It's the parent loan for undergrad students. So you as the parent can now borrow from the federal government. This year's rate is, I believe, 9.08%. And Katie, it has a 4-point origination fee. So you're paying 4% to borrow from the government, you as mom and dad, and 60 days later, the payment starts. We call that the largest predatory loan that exists in the college funding. We typically don't recommend that loan because it's always on mom and dad's plate to pay. They never can gift that, so to speak, over to their student. And you typically cannot, refinance a Parent Plus loan. You kind of get stuck with it. So outside of that, you have to be a savvy loan shopper and figure out, do I want a loan from, say, Sallie Mae? Do I want to go to SoFi? Do I want to go to Wells Fargo? Do I want to get my credit run and have my student apply and I'll be their co-signer? Then you have to make all kinds of decisions. Do you want a variable rate? Do you want a fixed rate? Do you want to defer all of the payments? Or do you want to start making payments now? Or do you want interest only? So it's a little like shopping for the mortgage rate you want at the very last minute. When you get that offer in May or June, that first bill is typically due the middle of August. You got to be a savvy loan shopper. We try to help parents look at that way ahead of the game so we don't get caught off guard asking drive-by advice, I call it, from other parents on the parent pages. I don't know if you've seen those, but when you become an incoming student at, say, Texas A&M or a big school like that, there's a parent-run Facebook page that it's overrun with parents asking other, hey, what's the best loan I should do? It's a little dangerous. I get a little cringe when I see it on there thinking this is dangerous for people to be just, because there's not a lot of financial people that know this process and understand the loans that people can turn to. Your accountant doesn't really understand it. And to be candid, the average financial advisor does not understand the parent or the student loan space whatsoever.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, if you were to go through like a SoFi or like a bank for a loan, those would be private loans as opposed to a federal loan.
You are correct. Private
right.
funding, which typically we can find if you're a parent, you have good credit, you typically right now in the space can find a lower interest rate than what the federal government's going to offer you. You can typically find something lower than 9%. Now, if you don't have good credit, that won't be the case. But we typically like to avoid that Parent Plus space at all costs.
Yeah. So I was also going to say, what should students and parents consider before they take out student loans?
We have to be candid with our student. Can they do some part-time work while they're at school? Help offset some expense. I'm a firm believer in students helping pay for college with work, say a part-time job. It's not going to pay for everything. Both of my kiddos have gone through college and they both work to help ease the burden of what everybody was bringing to the table. So part-time work, I firmly believe is possible to help with that cost. The low interest student loans that your student can take, that can be an okay solution. We just have to be aware of the amounts to say we don't want more on our student than what they can handle in 4.5, 5 years to pay back. And then sometimes really, Katie, it comes down to school choice. There might be times for families where they say, okay, this school that's still going to cost us $50,000 out of pocket. It's okay to tell your student no, because they will thank you later for not putting that large financial burden on them. They might not thank you at 18 that they didn't get your school choice one, but it really does come down to school choice and evaluating, will I get a comparable degree at a school that I like almost as much, that's, say, half the price? So looking at those schools ahead and trying to understand what is their really net cost at the end of the day is very, very important. Pre-planning in this is key. We've just gotten away, Katie, from families and students budget planning for college. It's a significant problem in America. If you want to go buy a house, what happens? You get pre-qualified, right? If you're qualified for a $300,000 house, your realtor is probably not showing you $1 million home. If you're shopping for a car, what's your payment? How long do you want to amortize it? The salespeople in the car lot know what they can fit you into, and they know they're not going to show you that $100,000 Range Rover if you can afford the Chevy. We're not doing that for college. We're letting our student pick, sometimes for all the wrong reasons. Our theme is you have the right academic and social fit for your kiddo and the right financial fit for you and your student long-term. It's
Right.
a three-pronged process, and it really takes some significant pre-planning on that.
I was just going to emphasize the planning. And I think like nowadays too, with like social media and stuff, the kids are seeing different colleges from all over the country being advertised on social media and stuff. And they look so great. And they think I want to go there, but they don't know all the cost factors in it. So I think that also plays a part into it nowadays too.
Absolutely. I mean, we're in the information age. 5 years, I see a lot of students already coming in with the data list they pulled offline, we're the top 10, computer science colleges, those types of things. When they're not taking time to do the research, or what are the best schools in my backyard where I can pay in-state tuition, get some scholarship, and do okay, versus 8 of them that aren't even within 500 miles of where they live.
Exactly. Definitely think parents need to have that conversation with their child before senior year. You're like, okay, realistically, let's think about this long term.
Yes, absolutely, because they're the one going to school. And if they are going to be burdened with some student loan, you aren't doing your student any favors by not talking about the cost. They have to be brought into that discussion.
Right.
Understand there's going to be some things we're going to outlay, and then there's going to be things we need to expect from you. Help make, Katie, I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen students who are informed in the process make some amazing, mature financial decisions up front that didn't require them at all to take any student loan debt out. And they were so happy with themselves.
Yeah.
Made that choice because they were given the information to understand ahead of time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. I mean, I've listened to some of your previous podcasts, and my own experience with some of our clients is some young students told me, I wish I wouldn't have picked that because I have more debt than I really could manage. And some students come out with no debt. It's such an epidemic, Katie, that odds are their future spouse will probably be carrying some. Point discussion now when people are talking about joining their lives together. Oh, how much student loan debt do you have? It's a very common topic of conversation, right? I don't know if it changes people's minds sometimes, but it's a data point you need to know.
Great. Especially like nowadays with buying a house, if you're a couple and, the interest rates on that, now you still have student loans, and it's just,
Yes.
there's definitely a lot of things that you're not thinking about when you're a senior in high school.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
you're not. And a holistic plan, including you and your family and who's going to be involved in helping you, is really key to understand your potential to financial future with no student loans. You'll be able to start your retirement planning earlier. You'll be able to start saving for, a down payment sooner. When we mitigate that undergrad exposure to those loans, it's extremely important.
And college is what you make of it. So if people are maybe deterred by going to a state school, you could still make the best out of it.
I appreciate you saying that. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah.
You're going to make new friends. You'll get, put your roots in where you got planted. We know it's about education, but we know there's a huge social aspect to it as well. And some students will be okay at a 70,000 student campus, and others want a campus that has 5,000 students.
Right.
Important to vet as well, right?
Right. Right. I mean, I went to a state school and everything worked out great for me.
So did I. I didn't want to. I wanted to go somewhere smaller, but that was, way back in the dark ages where you had to really seek out a lot of information, and my parents just didn't. And it turned out to be fine. I clearly remember my mother sitting me down at the kitchen table and showing me, this school you'd have zero debt, this school you'd have about 30,000. Yeah. Well, in 1990, that's a lot of money. In today's terms, it's still a lot of money. It'd probably be about like 70,000 nowadays. And, I was upset for a little while, but I realized she was correct, and it worked out for me. And I'm really thankful I made that decision, but she was very, very candid with me about it. And I so appreciate her doing that.
Angie, thank you for sharing with me and thank you for joining me today. I really appreciated having you.
Yeah, thanks for a good discussion. I appreciate it as well.
College finances involve more than just tuition. Remember to plan for housing, books, campus fees, and other expenses. It's wise to open a college savings account as early as possible, but keep in mind that it will be considered when you apply for the FAFSA. Make sure to complete the FAFSA every year as your financial situation might change, affecting your aid eligibility. Parents, if the financial aid you receive from FAFSA isn't what you expected, explore all your options. Also, be proactive with scholarships. Apply at the beginning of your senior year to avoid missing out. If you're considering student loans, remember that they will need to be repaid, so borrow only what you're comfortable with paying back. I'll make sure to link Angie's website in the description of this podcast, so if you're looking for college financial help, you can reach out to her there. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.